Hey, welcome back. Today, now that we have started to add some depth and dimension and have been able to take some time to evaluate our paintings, we're gonna probably do I'm just gonna review some of the final necessary adjustments I would do in my final evaluation of a painting, and talk a little bit about some of the significance of, again, evaluating the painting for crisp edges, seeing what I need to dull down, sharpen up. There are areas of this painting which I see that need some adjustment in value. For example, this area here, I need to tell the story of that shadow being cast onto a dress there, bringing out some highlights that I've lost, as well as just adding some interesting details into the painting. So let's get started. First thing to do right now, I've noticed that, like I said, these areas here, I do need to darken a little bit and push back. And then also I want to bring a little bit of continuation of this this shadow here, and just give a little bit of a hint to it above our arm here, and that would just help give a sense of continuation and harmony of something moving behind her arm right there. There's some edges I probably need to address as well. This one is still not clear. This line has dried rather hard. So let's get started. First of all, I will address some just big block shadows. With all painting, obviously this is a demo, so I don't have a lot of time to get into too many of the adjustments that I might make on an actual thing. It really sometimes has to do with the amount of time that you have, or at least in this case it does. In an actual commission, for example, I might spend a bit more time faffing around, if you will, on some of these details. But for now, I'll just show you just a little bit about my thinking process, and you guys back at home in your studios can evaluate how much time you have to give in these final stages. Softening what I feel like needs to be softened. And what else do we notice? This part here, I'd like to go a little bit darker. I'm just dipping into my Rockwell sea blue black here. Also, just notice this line right here. Again, even though it seems like a hard, strong line, I may not actually, in the painting, make a strong line. I will try and break up my lines where possible. Adding some little strokes of detail here. The fun part of this phase of me just adding just some little couple bits of detail is your hand can still be pretty loose and expressive. Your paint strokes are rather like a signature. It can be very individual to you and have its own style and personality. More like calligraphy. Brushwork often can be recognized, and usually in this phase it can be fun and playful. And then something that I want to that I mentioned, I want to bring in just a slight wash right here, to kind of connect the back of her arm into, or the the shadow behind her arm back into the background there. So I think for this area, this was a Serpentine. I should have really woken up my paints a little. It's kind of imitating the grass, the movement of the grass there. Just digging into my amethyst, dropping that in. That kind of helps connect that together. And I'm gonna quickly soften some of those lines that I may not want. Just kind of brushing through, leaving hard lines and soft lines together. I'm gonna get my size 4. Oh, is it size 4? Yeah, my size 3 half dagger, not half dagger, half rigger. There we go. I'm just gonna reach in, oops, for my Serpentine. I kind of muddied that a little bit. A little trick you can do is get some clean water, and also you can pick up the pigment and just run it up if you wanted to. There you go. So that being done, I'm also, as I'm evaluating this painting, I'm just going to bring in my Eradicator brush. I think in a previous lesson as discussed, if you don't have the Eradicator brush, you can use a synthetic or slightly stiff bristled paintbrush. It can be like this square one here, or something smaller, just to help lift the paint. I want to add a bit more interest into her hair here, and anytime I see, I'm looking at the lines and I'm seeing how I can help create movement and flow. So I'm just using a couple of sweeping brush strokes just to create a little bit of texture into her hair here. Also kind of slightly blending out areas in which I think have distracting lines, like this one here. I just kind of want to help give it a little bit of a smoother, smooth sense of movement in there. Here you can see there's loads of blunt lines that where I didn't bleed something out properly, so I'm just wetting my brush and lifting very gently. I do like this process. I find for me this is one of the fun parts of finalizing my painting. I have a hard line, oops, right here, that I want to soften on the side of her face there where the shadow hits. And I want to rescue this shape that's slightly in her ear here. Run it out. There's some really faint wispy baby hairs. I find this technique really effective, especially when you're going through some darker parts of the painting and you're just lifting. I will confess I can get very overboard in this. Another part that I want to soften are these hard highlights here. What I might do on the edge of this highlight, I might just kind of cut in, see if I can cut in a little bit here just to help bring that line over, and also maybe soften some parts, so some of these lines. Trying to move in the same direction as the hair there. Bring this line up. Just soften what I see needs softening. Oops. There you go. I'm gonna leave a little gap of dark and just add a little stripe there. Kind of helps lift up a little bit here, and it helps kind of bring a continuation of the line. That white highlight again helps tell a story of wispy hairs. Softening edges, and I saw a little bit on her lip. This is also you can use this Eradicator brush to just soften any hard shadows here. See, I've got a hard shadow, I've gone a little bit overboard. Kind of rescue her nostril right here. I will say you do have to be careful going overboard on this method also means sometimes you can damage the surface of the paper. Now if you want to do that intentionally, that's fine. But yeah, just something to be aware of. Rescue a little bit of a highlight for the top of her bottom lip there. I do love this brush and just how it does create some really beautiful softness. Just gonna soften this line here. Yeah, you can also use a paper towel once you've disrupted the pigment a little bit to lift. The great thing about mineral pigments is that they can be very easy and nice to lift. This technique as well, you can also apply to parts of a dress. There's some, you know, fun little highlights just coming in through that kind of denim-y dress there. I'm just going to change the angle of how I'm sitting here so I can draw a better line. Don't be afraid to use the fullness of the direction of your brush strokes. It doesn't always have to, your hand doesn't always have to be positioned like this. You can move your hand around and that will affect the direction of your brush strokes, and it kind of keeps things varied and interesting. As well, like what else I'm looking for in this stage is I'm looking for like big blocks of color where I find it's like like here, for example, on the edge of this grass where it's kind of nothing going on there, and sometimes it's important, and sometimes I just want to cut in a little bit and add a bit of interest. So here I'm gonna maybe just allude to that grass just moving through again, this part here. Yeah, pretty much anytime I see something that's maybe a little bit boring, or I want to just add some interest, something that I find a little bit too bland, I'm just gonna cut in some details. I am using a photo as a reference, but at this point here, it is totally okay to go rogue a little bit and imagine, think about how the light is moving through the painting and use your imagination. You can also cut gentle highlights here into the shadows. Pretty up anything that you might find ugly or doesn't quite make sense. Another thing to consider is that not every area of your painting should, well, I say should, not every area of your painting needs to be, you know, high definition quality. And sharp. If you do that, one thing I don't like about new TVs is it doesn't leave room for mystery, imagination for the person viewing your painting. I personally, I can't look at paintings or photographs where there is too much detail. It's really overwhelming and hard for my eyes and my brain to know where I need to put my focus on, and where and it leaves very little room for my brain and my imagination to try and figure out the gaps in the details. And in fact, a lot of in painting, you don't actually need necessarily a lot of accuracy and fine detail to preserve likeness. But once you have the anchor points, especially if it's a known person, that person will fill in the blanks of missing information. The brain will do that subconsciously and automatically. And the brain helps take that likeness a little bit further. So that's the part of painting which I want to engage with the other person. So if you're concerned about likeness, yeah, leave room for the imagination. Leave room for the person viewing the painting to participate in your piece. I'm looking at my grasses here. Just thinking of how I can soften bits which maybe don't make sense. At the same time, also accepting that some things will not make sense, and it gives that inaccuracy, that human quality to your painting, that reminds a person that this is just a painting. And it's a painting is different from a photograph. Another thing as well, as a couple of final tips as the artist painting this, is thinking about the details that matter to you, thinking about the things that you would like to focus on. I'm just going to correct this knee here while I talk. But as an artist, as the person depicting this subject, there's going to be things that appeal to you, that draw your attention, and that you see that other people may not see. You may see the movement of light, you might see details, you might see expressions, emotion, whatever it might be. You fill in the blank. Just correcting the roundness of her knee here, which I have left out and forgotten. For you as the artist, these are the things that make your style, your style of painting individual to you. And so using this part of the process to make sure that those things you notice are vocalized through your brushwork, through the details that you choose to depict. Even if you go rogue, how you let your imagination go wild, how you add those extra details. I've seen some of my friend artists, they will add wallpaper patterns or animals and fantasy backgrounds, whatever it may be, whatever it is that helps express the voice or the mission, the why of your practice as an artist, or the story of your painting. Yeah, these are great things to take time to ask yourself and to make sure you communicate that through your work. I will also say there's a lot of details I've left out that I considered adding to the painting, but I only really roughly alluded to in these beautiful yellows of the dandelions. But you can choose to add them now or leave them out. But all in all, these are ways in which I may simplify painting for the sake of focusing on what matters to me. Another quick tip that I might add let me just fix this corner here. I might add in some, while it's still wet, some of this amethyst, just kind of connecting this side to this side. I might have to soften that a little bit later, this edge here. There's some warmth in her shadowed crease of her knee that I'm gonna throw in there very poorly. Can look and fix that later. I can leave that confused. Okay. What was I going to talk about? Yes, highlights. So we left out highlights, we've added the darks. Sometimes it might just be areas in which you cannot scrub out that white, that clear. And that's when I would usually use a, if I can find it, I might have to, oh, here we go. I usually leave a little pot of gouache. Gouache. Usually with gouache, I will, let me go find some. I have some somewhere. Thing with gouache is, here. I can use this is an opaque white watercolor. You can use that. Sometimes I would just drop some of that in there. Other times I will use a gouache. Just a little unprepared. Oh, here we go. Thank you. So we have a very messy Winsor Newton design is gouache. It's an opaque. I mentioned before, I never leave gouache or whites in my palettes at all. If anything, I might squirt it on some rough paper, but you never really want to put it in your palette, because if you contaminate your gouache with your palette, you're gonna get this chalkiness in your pigment that you may not want, essentially. And for that reason as well, I usually leave this part right to the very end, because I do not want to also even contaminate my water. So I'm just gonna activate this with a little bit more water. Clean water. Just agitate it a little bit. The thing with gouache is even sometimes, actually I will get a fresh little blob. Even if you use a fresh bit of gouache, it may take a couple of layers to get a very clean, opaque white. But what I want to do here is I usually like to leave some really sharp highlights in the eyes. And I just lost it a little bit here, but that just really helps the sparkle. I already managed to keep that one clean, but just a little dot here and there can really help. Something as well in this painting, you can see that there's just a couple of little fine hairs that you can, if you wanted to, just add these little fine lines in. This kind of gives you a little bit more accuracy that is a little bit harder to achieve from the Eradicator brush. Just kind of, you can add these little hair strands, and just be careful. Even with hair, you want to leave little gaps in your lines, as I mentioned before. Careful not to draw full lines. Wispy hairs, things that might be out of place. I'm just looking at the reference photo for inspiration. Areas where this works really well, in areas that are super dark, so I might just leave in just little areas here and really dark places, adding just that little whisper of light. you can go overboard with this, so do be careful. You don't want to add too many lines, it can be distracting. You just want to find that balance there. Clean up that little white of her teeth. Hint to some of the teeth that I've lost back here. Details. Yeah, so you may have to do a couple of layers of the gouache in order to keep the strength of those highlights. And if you do, it's not you, it's just the gouache. There you go. Just gonna add that little line there. Just find it really interesting. I'm looking at this part of her face and I feel like I could just break this up a little bit. Just a hint, a sense of little, if it will, there we go. Just want to hint at all these little fine hairs that are coming across her face. And there you go. A couple of tips on mounting and framing and presenting the finished painting. I think I'll leave it here today. I may go back into it a little bit later on my own time just to keep fiddling really and polish up some areas which I think need a little bit of attention. But now that we kind of spruced up some of the highlights and the shadows, mounting and framing, normally I find it cheaper and easier to ship paintings unframed. But if you're handing it over to someone, I usually get custom mats and backing board, and I use what do you call it, framing tape. It's usually acid free, and I will frame it that way. I also like to give my clients or customers some information on how to care for their paintings. So I usually provide a care card for them. It's reminding to keep watercolor paints out of direct sunlight, even though I use a lot of minimal pigments and they should be super light fast. That is super helpful in helping preserve the painting. Just some last tips. Practice and patience with yourself. Mastering watercolor portraits takes time and practice, and you'll find if you kind of keep a record of your work, you'll be really surprised at how constant practice will help you improve, and you'll be surprised over a length of time how over months, weeks, years, your practice will develop how you will notice subtlety in values and tones, how you will begin to see shadows and warmth and cools differently. I like to offer myself a lot of constructive criticism. I always like to point out to myself the positives and the negatives of a painting. I don't believe in being optimistic or pessimistic personally. I like to just be accurate and realistic with myself. And so I personally like to, as a private practice, always evaluate what is good about my painting, what is bad, what I could improve on. And for me, that's always been helpful for myself. And sometimes I get stuck. And so I do rely on an incredible community of artists for constructive feedback when I need. I'll ask them, what is wrong with this painting? Help me. Nothing I really do is on an island. I do have an incredible network of artists who I depend on. I will share some of the resources that I have provided you on the show notes, and yeah, just as a hopeful reminder that capturing the essence of a personal portrait is an art form that allows for your own personal expression and interpretation. You will see things in a portrait that the other person who commissioned you will not, and so know that and love that about yourself, and exploit that. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, just DM me through my Instagram account that you will have access to. Message me or tag me in your paintings. I would love to see what you've come up with, and if you need any critical feedback, and if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. So thank you for painting with me, and I'll see you soon.